everybody, how are you? I hope you're well. You know, for many years I've been making patchwork quilts, about 40 years, believe it or not. And very often they're traditional. I love those sorts of designs. So something like this, which is very kind of homely, isn't it? This one sits on the back of a sofa and has done for years and years. But when I ask myself what it is I love about patchwork, it isn't necessarily the technique of sewing little patches together. It's the effect that that technique does create. But it's the colours, it's the shapes, it's the patterns that you can create, as well as the thrift, obviously. But for quite a number of years now, I've been using a combination of techniques to arrive at a similar visual effect that doesn't necessarily involve lots of seaming of little patches. So if I just grab a couple of these little blocks to show you, I've been printing my patchwork. Now sometimes my quilts have a certain amount of piecing, so there'll be some blocks that are true, traditional patchwork, but then I can extend the design by printing with fabric paints or acrylic paints with a medium in, and I achieve that by making a little print block. So here I've got one, a simple little design on a piece of thin cardboard. This one is on a heftier bit of balsa wood. I think the larger your print block, the more important it is to have something that's kind of firm and stable. But the design itself is achieved by cutting shapes from self-adhesive foam, that kind of material that you find in a craft shop, and it's usually aimed at children, but it suits me just perfectly. And I find if I take a little bit of time, I can make simple or complex blocks that will last for many uses, many years. And I think if you look at these quilts behind me, you can see how I've achieved the effect. This block is called Storm at Sea. I've got a couple of different variations of that, different versions. But I think if you look, you can see how I've printed the block and done a repeat and repeat and repeat. So you can create an all-over design. You can vary the colour just by changing the colour of the paint that you apply to your block as you make your print. And you can mask areas off so that here I wanted this big wave shape to have a crest of foam over the top. So I cut a mask in from freezer paper and screened off that area so that I could carry on with my printing to register it like this to make it a kind of all over repeat design, but certain areas were masked off with the freezer paper, and then when I pulled the freezer paper off, I've got that design just going up to the point where I want it to stop. And I did the same thing with this quilt here. This is one of a series of quilts that I made where I started with some photographs that I'd taken on holiday in France many years ago of, I know it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it, to look at distressed layers of paint, but I mean they do appeal. We all love that colour, don't we? And especially when the surface of, this is an old fishing boat on the beach, just abandoned, a wreck, and erosion and weather and the tides had started taking away various layers of the paint. It had obviously, over its lifetime, had many different colours, and it revealed all of these fascinating colours below. So using that photograph, I had Laura digitally print that onto a piece of cotton poplin for me. So that is the base layer. But then I've taken my print block and I've printed Storm at Sea all the way over it, forming again a cresting wave. So you can see here the extent of the print block. And I've purposely gone for a sort of soft and distressed look with it here, because anything too solid and bold would have gone against the idea of this poor old distressed boat with its peeling layers. And I love to have a title for my quilts. I actually like to have a title well before I even start the quilt, because it's one of those things, you've got a phrase in your head, helps you focus, helps you create the effect that you want, helps you come up with the design. And I used to read an awful lot of Hemingway, and so this title says, "And in his dreams he heard the surf roar." And that's a quote from The Old Man and the Sea. And I thought, couldn't be more apt, could it really? I've got this distressed old fishing boat that's been abandoned, and Hemingway was talking about an old man in a boat fighting the elements and after his fish, and he was there for hours and hours and hours. So I loved that phrase, and it just helped me find my direction with the quilt. So having decided that it's the patchwork shapes that I like and not necessarily the technique, I thought about interpreting that into other items. So just put those down and show you. I don't know if any of you have seen this before. This is a needle punched, so I've had my embellisher machine out. I've just cut some simple shapes that represent what looks like a very traditional star block in patchwork, but there's no seaming involved here. I just laid the patches on top of my base layer and punched them with the multi-needle head of an embellishing machine. And I have involved a little bit of stitch, partly because I love to hand sew. It's just one of those contemplative things that I enjoy doing, but also to sort of represent the quilting line that you would have in traditional patchwork. So this cushion, again, it's in daily use. I made it some time ago, but it sits on the sofa and I love it. So it's quite a robust surface. And then, it's funny, I think it must be the fact that spring is coming. I've spent quite a few days trying to purge my studio. I think if you've got your own space, there's a danger that you just leave everything out and it just gets more and more and more cluttered. And really, that's not conducive, I don't think, to being creative. So I've spent a couple of days going through stuff. And it is quite surprising. If you dig deep enough, you never know what you're going to find. So when I was making that cushion, I obviously started a second. Which is not yet complete. The thread is still attached there. I'm doing some decorative stitching over some of the patches here, but you can see it's that same star design, very traditional looking patchwork design, but here I'm working just with felt and with the needle punch technique, and I'm going to finish it and wrap it around this bolster and make another cushion for my sitting room. But, maybe you love the look of traditional patchwork, but you're not a sewer at all. So, do you remember seeing this? You can take that motif, that favourite little star block, and use it in any number of different ways. So here's my little painted treasure box. Maybe that would appeal to you. So, over the years, DMTV have covered all sorts of techniques. Many of them quilt related, a lot of them painting, some of them printing, some of them a combination of all of those things. So I hope you'll find time to have a little browse through the website and find something that really appeals to you. So be creative and keep watching. So talk to you again soon. Bye for now.